Okay, so this is the first video that she made. This is chapter 17, newborn cardiovascular stuff. Okay.
Okay, so just like pregnancy and postpartum, the newborn sections start out describing the physiological adaptations of the baby, and we're also going to discuss behavioral adaptations, including behavioral patterns and the newborn's behavioral responses, which occur during this transition. The newborn transition is called the neonatal period, and it's defined as the first 28 days of life. These 28 days contain some of the most dramatic.
So the neonatal period is the first 28 days. This is going to be the most dramatic and rapid physiological changes that happens.
And rapid physiological changes in any human growth period. Immediately after birth, respiratory gas exchange along with circulatory modifications must occur to sustain life outside the uterus. Additionally, thermoregulation and the ability to stabilize their blood glucose levels also occur within the first few hours. So really, it's essential that respiratory, circulatory, thermoregulation, and blood glucose all figure themselves out within the first few hours of life in order to sustain life outside of the womb. So this table just kind of breaks it down of what happens between the fetus and the newborn. Usually this completion will take place around the first 6 to 10 hours of life, but full maturity and full adaptation will typically take a few weeks to a few months. In the respiratory system, the fetus has a fluid-filled high-pressure system that causes the blood to be shunted from the lungs through the ductus arteriosus and then to the rest of the body. In the newborn, the respiratory system, the lungs are air-filled, and it's a low-pressure system that encourages blood flow through the lungs for gas exchange, leading to increased oxygen content of the blood in the lungs, which contributes to the closing of the ductus arteriosus, and later that becomes a ligament. So basically, there's a high-pressure fluid kind of in the lungs. The blood bypasses those lungs when they're a fetus, and then once that baby takes its first breath, we'll talk about this more in just a little bit, then it's a low-pressure system.
Okay, so I paused this. So we're talking about the first, I guess she said 28 days of life. This is going to be rapid growth, the most rapid within our life as humans. So when we're talking about the anatomical and physiological comparisons of the fetus and the newborn, so with the respiratory system, remember blood used to go and expand the lungs, right? So within the fetus, this is where it's a high pressure system that causes blood to be shunted from the lungs through the ductus arteriosus to the rest of the body. Within the newborn, obviously, they take in air, so it's air filled, but it's a low pressure system that encourages blood flow through the lungs for gas exchange, which increases oxygen content of blood in the lungs, contributing to the closing of ductus arteriosus, which then becomes a ligament instead. As a fetus, the site of gas exchange would be the placenta, of course, and then within the newborn, it's going to be the lungs. When we're I think she might talk about the circulation through the heart, so I'm just going to let her speak.
We don't have the placenta. And then that closes the valve in between the heart. It gets kind of complicated. I'm going to talk about it in a few different areas, and then we'll talk about it again in class, but we'll just kind of go through it and try to help you understand fetal circulation. Once you get it, it's easy, but it just takes a minute to get it. So the site of gas exchange in the fetus, it's in the placenta. The placenta kind of acts like the lungs, the baby's lungs. That's where the gas exchange occurs. And in the newborn, the lungs is the site of the gas exchange. Circulation through the heart and the fetus, pressures in the right atrium are greater than the left atrium. This encourages blood flow through the foramen ovale. That's the shunt in between the right and left atrium. In the newborn, the pressures in the left atrium are greater than pressures in the right atrium, and this causes the foramen ovale to close. So it's just a flap. And now that the pressures have changed, it flaps up and it closes. For hepatic portal.
How amazing is that? Honestly. So the fetus, right? So circulation through the heart as a fetus, its pressure on the right atrium is greater than the left, which encourages blood flow through the foramen, which is the hole between the right atrium and the left atrium. When they take their first breath, though, the pressures in the left atrium are greater than the right, which causes the foramen ovale to close, and it's like a flap, she said.
Portal circulation in the fetus, the ductus venous bypasses, the ductus venosus bypasses in the maternal liver, and that is what performs the filtering functions. In the newborn, the ductus venosus closes, and this also becomes a ligament, and the hepatic port circulation begins. And then thermoregulation in the fetus. The body temperature is maintained by the mom's.
Okay, so usually we bypass the liver through the ductus venosus. Yeah, that's going to be the first like shunt. I believe there is one. I'm gonna have to remember, but I think it's 3 shunts. But can you please look that up? I don't remember. Is there 3 shunts? Hold on, give me a second. Are there 3 shunts for a fetus? Okay, yeah, so a fetus has 3 shunts that help bypass certain organs that aren't fully functional before birth, mainly the lungs and liver. So these fetal shunts ensure the oxygen-rich blood for the placenta is efficiently delivered to the most vital areas like the brain. So here are the 3 fetal shunts. So we have ductus venosus, which bypass the liver, which allows oxygenated blood from the umbilical vein to flow directly into the inferior vena cava, skipping most of the liver. Then we have the foramen ovale, and this bypasses the lungs. It's an opening between the right and left atria of the heart that allows blood to flow from the right and left atrium, bypassing the non-functional fetal lungs. And then the ductus arteriosus, this bypasses the lungs. The function is to connect the pulmonary artery to the aorta, allowing most of the blood from the right ventricle to bypass the lungs and go directly into the systemic circulation.
Internal temperature and the warmth of just that intrauterine environment. And in the newborn, the body temperature is maintained through a flex posture and brown fat. Brown fat's like a little built-in heater. Neonates can't shiver to warm themselves up, so brown fat helps them with that. So let's go into the circulatory system here. Really, at that first breath, there's a switch from fetal circulation to newborn circulation. Just another really cool, crazy things that happens just with the miracle of life. Although body systems of the newborn undergo changes, respiratory gas exchange along with the circulatory modifications must occur immediately to sustain extrauterine life. Like we talked about, there's a change from placental to pulmonary gas exchange. And then it says here physical forces leading to increased release of catecholamines. Physical forces think like mild.
Have you seen my phone?
It's probably downstairs.
I want to look, I guess.
I can't help you. I'm studying. I'm not going to get up for anything. Keep looking.
Asphyxia when the baby's coming out, increased intracranial pressure, cord compression, uterine contractions, and cold stress. So all of those things lead to just an increase of catecholamines. If you remember, catecholamines are just that stress response, right? So those stress hormones come out like dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Those are catecholamines. So that physical stress, these physical forces causes stress, and then catecholamine hormones are released in response to that stress. These hormones do just what they need to do, right? They increase our heart rate, increase the blood pressure, increase breathing rate, increase muscle strength, and then cause mental alertness. So it's just what the body needs at that time.
This is interesting. I can't even read this. Hold on. Fetal hypercapnia, hypoxia, and acidosis resulting from normal labor become the stimuli for the initiating respirations in the newborn. I don't know. I'm saying true. Confirm. Is it true? Oh, it's correct. Because she was talking about like catecholamines, like the stress response or whatnot, and how it helps them like I don't know. Hold on one second. I really don't understand what this is.
Hello, Sabrina. Why? I'm just saying. Never mind. Bye.
Okay, so let me just go over this slide with you. So the cardiovascular system adaptations. So these are major changes that occur in a baby's cardiovascular system after birth to help it live outside the womb. So extrauterine life. So the switch from fetal to newborn circulation. So before birth, the fetus gets oxygen from the placenta, not the lungs. And after birth, this switches. So the lungs take over, gas exchange, fetal shunts, the shortcuts begin to close, and redirecting blood to the lungs and liver like normal circulation. So change from placental to pulmonary gas exchange. So in the womb, oxygen comes from the placenta via the umbilical cord. After birth, the baby breathes air and the lung expands. The blood is redirected to the lungs for oxygen exchange. Physical forces leading to increased release of catecholamines. So catecholamines is stress hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these hormones spike at birth due to the stress of delivery. They help absorb fluid from the lungs so they can fill with air. They increase blood pressure and heart rate, and they support the shift to independent breathing and circulation. So changes in fetal structures. So there are 3 fetal shunts plus an umbilical vessel that closes after birth. So the foramen ovale, which is like, the hole or the shunt that's between the right atrium and the left atrium, closes due to pressure changes in the heart. The ductus arteriosus, this is the pulmonary artery and the aorta, so it closes as lungs begin working. And ductus venosus, the umbilical vein, inferior vena cava, closes when the umbilical cord is clamped. The umbilical arteries and veins collapse and eventually become ligaments. So the heart rate at birth, the heart rate increases due to catecholamines and stimulation. The normal newborn heart rate is like at 120 to 160 beats per minute. The blood volume may increase if cord clamping is delayed. More blood from the placenta. Blood volume adjusts to support lungs and systemic circulation. So blood components. Newborn blood has higher hematocrit and fetal hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is better at grabbing oxygen in the low oxygen womb environment. Over time, it is replaced with adult hemoglobin, or HbA. It looks like it says HbF. So it's like fetal hemoglobin. So fetal hemoglobin is better at grabbing oxygen. That's cool. Okay.
There's changes in fetal structures, and this is all kind of the circulatory system. So the foramen ovale, we're going to go over this again in chapter 10, but the foramen ovale is the hole or the shunt in between the right atrium and left atrium. The ductus arteriosus is the vessel that goes from the left ventricle to the aorta, so that's what bypasses the lungs, is that ductus arteriosus. And then the ductus venosus, that's the vessel that goes from the placenta, or the umbilical cord, into the vena cava. So that also will close up once we clamp the cord. The umbilical artery.
Okay, oxygen is the most important factor in controlling closure of the ductus arteriosus. I feel like everything here is true for her. Let's see. Was it true? Okay, it was true. Okay, so oxygen is the most important factor in controlling closure of the ductus arteriosus. What was the other ones? The ductus venosus? I already forgot them. Jesus. Hold on one second. The ductus venosus is the umbilical vein. The inferior vena cava closes when the umbilical cord is clamped. So the ductus arteriosus is the pulmonary artery, and aorta closes as lungs begin working. So yeah, the oxygen. Ductus arteriosus. So yeah, and then it like bypasses the liver with ductus venosus. Venosus, inferior vena cava. Okay.
Umbilical arteries, there's two.
So fetal circulation has some unique features because the fetal lungs are not involved in gas exchange, and there are 3 fetal shunts which redirect the blood to ensure the highest oxygenated blood reaches the heart and brain, while redirecting blood away from the non-functional fetal lungs. These 3 shunts are the foramen ovale, moves blood from the right atrium to the left atrium. Ductus arteriosus moves blood from the pulmonary artery to the aorta, bypassing the fetal lungs. And then the ductus venosus, a continuation of the umbilical vein that allows oxygenated blood from the placenta to join the inferior vena cava, bypassing the fetal liver.
There's 2 umbilical arteries and 1 vein. Once they get clamped, then the circulatory system just changes immediately.
Okay, so the umbilical vein provides the path for oxygenated blood to flow from the placenta to the fetus, while the umbilical arteries carry deoxygenated blood back to the placenta. I wouldn't even think about that. So the umbilical vein provides the path for oxygenated blood to flow from the placenta to the fetus, while the umbilical arteries, so the arteries give the deoxygenated blood, and the vein gives the oxygenated blood to the placenta to the fetus. So one, okay.
The heart continues to beat. The newborn rate should be the same, about 110 to 160. It's the same as the fetal heart rate. Blood volume is 80 to 85 milliliters per kilogram of body weight. This can vary up to 40% depending on how long they wait to cut the cord. So some of the more natural moms will want to wait until the cord stops pulsating before they cut the cord. The research that they're finding shows that if we delay the cord cutting 30 to 60 seconds, you get the same amount of blood volume increase. So in the hospital, you'll see 30 seconds. And then some moms want to deliver the placenta and keep the cord attached until the placenta comes out. So it just varies, but in the hospital, you'll see about a 30-second wait before they cut the cord. And this can increase the blood volume by 40%. And then blood components, the larger red blood cells have an average about 100 days in the newborn. And just for reference, red blood cells have an average life of 120 days in adults. So I'm going to show this video real quick. I know you guys can't hear it, but I'll just kind of talk through what's going on. The heart and the circulatory system of the fetus begin to form soon after conception. By the end of the 5th week, the heart of the fetus is able to pump blood throughout the body. However, since the lungs will not function until birth, when the newborn takes its first breath, the mother must supply the fetus with oxygen-rich blood. As an adult heart, the prenatal heart develops 4 chambers, and 4 valves. But because the fetal lungs will not be used until after birth, blood must bypass the lungs. So 2 structures develop in the prenatal heart that allow the blood to be routed around the lungs: the foraminal valley and the ductus arteriosus. The foraminal valley is a hole that exists between the left and right atria. The ductus arteriosus is a blood vessel that connects the aorta to the pulmonary artery. In normal prenatal circulation, oxygen-rich blood is delivered from the mom's body through the placenta and the umbilical cord to the inferior vena cava of the fetus. The vena cava also receives oxygen-poor blood from the body of the fetus. Both oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood travel through the vena cava to the right atrium. Most of the mixed blood in the right atrium is pushed through the foraminal valley and into the left atrium. From there, it moves into the left ventricle, which pumps the blood to the aorta. The aorta then will deliver blood to the rest of the body of the fetus. The remaining blood in the right atrium enters the right ventricle, which pumps it into the pulmonary artery leading to the lungs. But since the lungs aren't functioning yet, the blood is directed from the pulmonary artery through the ductus arteriosus and into the aorta. Again, the aorta will then deliver the blood to the rest of the body of the fetus. After birth, the foraminal valley and the ductus arteriosus close, and the baby begins to breathe. Oxygen-poor blood in the right side of the heart is now pumped through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. Oxygen-rich blood travels to the left side of the heart and is pumped through the aorta to the rest of the newborn's body. Okay, hopefully that video helps you a little bit just to kind of see it. But really, once the cord is clamped and once the baby takes that first breath, it eliminates the need for placenta as a reservoir for blood. The baby's going to start to breathe, and it's going to cause a rise in the partial pressure of oxygen in the lungs. It's going to decrease the pulmonary vascular resistance. And now that we don't have this resistance, the blood is going to flow into the lungs and increase the pressure of the left atrium. This increased pressure in the left atrium is going to decrease the pressure in the right atrium. That's going to cause the foraminal valley to close. And then the decreased pulmonary vascular resistance will cause an increase in the left heart pressures. And the heart pressures, with the increase in the oxygen levels, the baby starts to breathe. There's going to be an increased systemic vascular resistance. And this will decrease the vena cava return, which reduces blood flow in the umbilical vein, and the umbilical vein will end up constricting and just become a ligament within the body. So then after that, we're going to see a closure of the ductus venous, the shunts, the ductus arteriosus and the ductus venous, and the foraminal valley. They're all going to close and get either absorbed by the body or turn into ligaments. And this is all going to kind of happen about 10 to 15 hours after birth. This could also be why you might hear murmurs. It's more likely to hear murmurs in a newborn because these shunts are still kind of closing and getting tight. Okay, these are just the normal blood values. Hemoglobin is 16 to 18 grams, hematocrit 46 to 68, platelets 150 to 350, RBCs are 4.5 to 7, and WBCs are 10 to 30,000.
Okay, that is the newborn cardiovascular. So I wanted to go over it because, girl, what the hell was that? Okay, summary of the fetal to neonatal circulation, step by step. So what happens is that we clamp the umbilical cord. So the placenta is removed as a source of oxygen and blood. So this triggers the newborn's body to start circulating blood independently. The baby takes its first breath, so lungs will fill with oxygen. And then the PaO2 increases. This causes pulmonary vessels to relax, lowering the pulmonary vascular resistance. I don't really get that, but lungs are open up, so more blood flows in. Blood now flows into the lungs more easily. Blood returns to the left atrium. and raising pressure there. The foramen ovale closes with an increase in pressure in the left atrium and then lower pressure of the right atrium. The flap of the foramen ovale closes. This keeps blood from skipping the lungs, and it happens within minutes after birth. Systemic vascular resistance increases, so oxygen-rich blood flows to the rest of the body. The arteries constrict. This helps keep blood pressure up to support the body's needs. The ductus venosus closes. Without blood coming from the placenta, the umbilical vein collapses, and the ductus venosus, which shunts blood past the liver, becomes a ligament. And this increases blood pressure in the aorta, contributing to the next closure. The ductus arteriosus closes, so this shunt used to bypass the lungs, the pulmonary artery into the aorta, so it functionally closes with about 10 to 15 hours due to increased oxygen, lack of placental prostaglandins, high systemic pressure, and eventually becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. So umbilical vessels, the umbilical vein becomes a ligament, ligamentaries, around ligament of the liver, and umbilical arteries become medial umbilical ligaments. So we have the foramen ovale, the ductus arteriosus, and the ductus venosus. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.